images.
First of all, it is necessary to ask a fundamental question. What did the Romans understand by the term barbarian? For Roman authors, the answer seemed relatively simple. In general terms, a barbarian was someone who lived beyond the frontiers of the Roman Empire. Yet this apparently straightforward definition concealed a complex mental universe, shaped by Roman ethnographic traditions, geography, and cultural hierarchies rather than by direct knowledge of foreign peoples. According to Roman perception, the world beyond the empire was divided into distinct regions, each populated by peoples assigned specific characteristics. To the north lived the Celts and the Germans. Romans often described them as physically strong, brave, and heroic, yet also rough, undisciplined, and resistant to urban life. These societies were imagined as primarily rural, lacking the refinement of cities. To the south were the Africans or Ethiopians, portrayed as intelligent and cunning, but also deceptive and unreliable. To the northeast lived the so-called Scythians, nomadic peoples who, in Roman imagination, spent almost their entire lives on horseback. To the east were the Persians, regarded as cruel and despotic rulers, yet undeniably civilized in their own way. So developed was Persian society that Ammianus Marcellinus, a 4th century historian, rarely even referred to the Sasanian Persians as barbarians. Finally, the Arabs were often depicted as savage, morally corrupt, and socially disordered. This worldview was reinforced by what modern scholars often call Roman geobiology. Climate, Romans believed, shaped both the body and the mind. In the cold northern regions, far from the sun, blood was thought to be thick and slow-moving. This supposedly explained why Germans were considered strong and courageous, yet lacking strategic intelligence. In Africa, closer to the sun, blood was believed to be thinner and to rise toward the head. Africans were therefore seen as intellectually sharp, but cowardly and treacherous. Between these extremes lay the temperate zone, the Roman world itself, naturally understood as the ideal balance of physical strength, moral virtue, and political wisdom. These stereotypes were not reserved only for peoples beyond Roman borders. Roman ethnography also applied them to regions inside the empire. Gauls, who lived farther north and were thought to descend from the Celts, were often described as more aggressive and warlike than Italians. Such distinctions force us to confront a deeper question. What did it truly mean to be Roman? The boundary between civilized Romans and barbarians was far more fluid than modern interpretations often assume. Rome placed itself at the center of the world, while barbarians occupied its margins, both geographically and intellectually. This mental universe gave Roman authors a powerful repertoire of images ready for rhetorical use. When Romans wrote about barbarians, they were rarely attempting to describe them objectively. These texts were not dialogues, nor neutral comparisons. Roman ethnography was, above all, a discursive construction. What matters here is not whether these descriptions were true, but how they were used. Roman authors were not anthropologists in the modern sense. They were moralists, politicians, and rhetoricians, writing for Roman audiences and Roman concerns. The barbarian, therefore, was never simply a foreigner. He was a mirror, sometimes flattering, sometimes disturbing, in which Roman society examined itself. Every description of the other implicitly contained a judgment about Rome, its virtues, its failures, and its anxieties about decline. The barbarian became a rhetorical instrument, used primarily in internal Roman debates. Because he was not Roman, he could represent whatever kind of other best served an author's argument. This rhetorical exaggeration served a clear purpose. By portraying enemies as fierce, countless, and untamed, Roman authors elevated Roman victories into moral and civilizational triumphs. Victory was not merely military, it was proof of Roman order overcoming chaos. Yet the same exaggerated barbarian could also be turned inward, becoming a warning. If Rome abandoned discipline, self-restraint, and respect for law, it risked becoming what it claimed to dominate. A classic example of this rhetorical strategy appears in Tacitus's Germania, written in the 1st century. Far from being a purely ethnographic description, Germania is a critique of Roman society. Tacitus sometimes presents the Germans as noble savages, praising their simplicity, bravery, and moral purity in contrast to Rome's luxury and decadence. At other times, however, he depicts them as violent and undisciplined, warning Romans of the dangers of losing their superiority. Tacitus's ambiguity is not a contradiction, but a deliberate strategy. The Germans are praised and condemned not because Tacitus was confused, but because his true subject was Rome itself. By alternating admiration and fear, Tacitus forced Roman readers to confront a troubling possibility: that moral superiority was not guaranteed by civilization alone, and that decadence could undo even the greatest empire. Despite these words, many historians and archaeologists long treated Germania as a direct account of Germanic society. This positive use of the barbarian image did not disappear. In the 5th century, Salvian of Marseille harshly criticized Roman society, claiming it was more unjust, corrupt, and sinful than barbarian communities. He argued that people fleeing to barbarian territories in search of freedom revealed the deep moral decay of Roman governance. Similar ideas appear in Orosius and in St. Augustine, where Augustine noted that the barbarians who sacked Rome in 410 often showed more mercy than Romans typically did toward defeated enemies. What makes these late Roman critiques so striking is that they invert traditional assumptions. Instead of barbarians threatening Roman order, Roman injustice itself becomes the true danger. The barbarian is no longer merely an external enemy. He becomes a moral benchmark, an uncomfortable comparison that exposes how far Roman society had drifted from its own ideals. Classical ethnography provided a vast arsenal of stereotypes. One could debate urban versus rural life through the image of the free German, discuss monarchy via the Persians, or reflect on nomadism through the Scythians. The barbarian was never a fixed category. It was fluid, instrumental, and situational. Barbarians could be praised without eliminating fear, just as they could be condemned while serving moral purposes. This ambiguity leads us to a complementary question: what did it mean to be Roman? In the late Empire, Roman identity had little to do with legal citizenship or geographic borders. Instead, it was tied to Romanitas, a concept linked to civilitas, education, lawful behavior, self-control, and moral discipline. Barbarians were seen as lacking law in two senses. They were not governed by a higher legal order, and they lacked mastery over their own passions. In this context, barbarism ceases to be a matter of birth or geography. It becomes a question of behavior. Lawlessness, rebellion, and moral excess were all interpreted as forms of barbarism, regardless of who committed them. Roman identity, therefore, was something that had to be continuously performed and defended. It could be lost not by crossing a frontier, but by crossing moral boundaries. Because Roman identity was cultural rather than linguistic, it was remarkably flexible. A barbarian could act more Roman than a Roman citizen, while Romans themselves could be accused of barbarism. Rebels, bandits, and usurpers were frequently labeled barbarians regardless of origin. Even regions within the empire, such as the Alps or North Africa, were associated with barbarism if they resisted control. In theory, the empire could barbarize without losing a single province. These shifting definitions remind us that Roman and barbarian were not opposing ethnic categories, but flexible cultural labels. They existed within a shared mental framework, constantly renegotiated according to political needs and social fears. In many ways, the Roman discourse on barbarism reveals less about the peoples beyond the empire, and far more about Rome's struggle to define itself in a changing world. Roman and barbarian identities were not objective or fixed. They were based on perception, behavior, and context. A general of barbarian origin could be fully accepted as Roman, while Roman citizens could lose their Roman identity. Ethnicity functioned as a flexible, cognitive, and situational concept, mobilized according to circumstances. Understanding this fluidity is essential for explaining how the inhabitants of the Western Roman Empire gradually came to identify themselves as Franks, Goths, or Anglo-Saxons.